Hey everybody, welcome to the GMG review. Today we're taking a look at Warhammer Underworlds Gnarlwood, the new season of Games Workshop's kitchen table competitive game set in the Age of Sigmar that they were kind enough to send along as a complimentary advanced review copy. Now, if you've never seen Warhammer Underworlds before, what this is a two-player battle box that passes all of the Christmas morning test rules. And if you don't know what that is, the Christmas morning test is how long is it between you when you rip the wrapping off a gift and you can be having fun. And this is a 1-2 fun, don't need anything else than what comes in this box type of box set. Push fit, easy to build models, shuffle and play decks with no deck construction required right out of the box, and all of the other accessories and stuff to play this game. There's literally nothing else required. It's two players, but can accompany or sort of accommodate more players as well. There isn't like a way of playing this with additional players and additional boards if you have more than one copy of the game, and takes about half an hour to play in its normal format of like a one-off game. You get two different factions in here. You're going to get the Sons of Velmorn, who are basically like a disappointed dad and his skeleton sons and also illegitimate son as an undead warband, and then the Gnarlspirit pack, which is for Dark Oath warriors who all have like been possessed by like an animal spirit while they're in Thondia, and have left their Dark Oath tribe to go and try and like run that down basically in the Gnarlwood. Now the settings shifted for Gnarlwood. You're in the under-rooty sort of like tunnels under the tree. So think of this like as a huge living forest. It's kind of, it's always traveling and consuming things, and Crash in the middle of it, this sort of ties to their release of the new Warcry game, is this huge like broken down Seraphon spaceship called the Talaxis, or the Eye of Chotek, which is the original name. And everybody wants the cool stuff inside. So new setting, new place to play, and a new box. And this is basically everything you need. So I'm not going to spend too much time on the box. If you've seen one of these before, I just showed you the back. There's not a lot explaining to do. You're going to get two board tile sets for playing on, all the tokens, dice, and accessories you need to play, and then you're going to get a bunch of decks. You get the two Rivals decks, which are the pre-constructed decks for the Gnarlspirits and the Sons of Velmorn, and then you get two additional decks, which are the new Universal decks that allow you to play any warband. All you need is the character cards for a warband. Could be from any season going all the way back to Shadespire, using just these cards. They're pre-constructed, they're ready to go, and they're designed to give you not just a new pool of cards to play the game with your older warbands, so you don't have to worry about your old card backs and old warbands and stuff like that, but also a new pool of stuff to deck construct in the NEMESIS format. And I'll talk about that a little bit more later. But that's the new sort of constructed format for Warhammer Underworlds. I'm going to have a separate video about my interview with the designer of this game and his key thoughts of like why this was going to be probably the best edition they've done so far of Warhammer Underworlds, and what their kind of like takeaways were and their plans were for making the game. But I'm going to focus on the box set and reviewing it right now. So yeah, let's jump into the rulebook. So there was a wonderful Warhammer community article highlighting the big key changes to the game, and they are fairly fundamental, such as being able to move additionally, so the ability to make more than one move action, to attack after you've charged, a bit like Overwatch and Kill Team, where when everyone's made a charge action, if you can't do anything else, then those guys can actually attack now, so they're not just stuck. You can't have like that feel bad moment if you've locked in your guys to an action, you're just sitting there and taking damage and maybe drawing objective cards. They're allowing for some new effects and stuff like the stagger effect and the new feature tokens, where you have a cover feature and you have a objective feature that can flip as well. So those are some like core mechanical changes to the games. I'm not going to spend too much talking about that because obviously they're covered really well on their own website. But I do want to talk about this rulebook and how it's laid out. And what they've done is they've actually siloed two types of content in the rulebook when you go through and you play it. So obviously, beginning of the rulebook, intro, what's in the box, I just overviewed that all for you. Before you play the warbands, the miniatures themselves, and I get a chance to paint them all up. They're super fun, as are almost all of the Warhammer Underworlds miniatures. While they are easy to build push fit miniatures, they're super detailed and like in almost any army would be considered character miniatures. So here we have King Vellmorn and then his sons. So these are his three sons. I like him best because he's fourth in line and the most disappointing of his sons. And then you have his illegitimate son, who's like, if Jon Snow was the mountain in Game of Thrones, that's who this dude is. He's ginormous. And Yeah, and is the most powerful and best, of course, of his sons, even though he can never actually claim the throne. And then the Gnarlspirit pack, all of them kind of like toteming a different animal. We have the Shaman, Sarkar Blackwing, who's the leader. We have Garl, Hammer, sorry, not Spinespitter. Crimson Kira, with their 2 axes and her Berserker Barrage, and then Lupin Longcut, the like more predatory dude with his predator mask. If you want a new prey miniature, this is a pretty good one, actually, with that mask on. So painted these up so we can play. Lovely miniatures. They were super fun to paint and do. So the first thing you're gonna notice though on this page is there's actually call-outs that say advanced rules. Now, one of the things that I think was noticed, and I'll comment a little bit about this in a separate video, but it's a lot to digest a very process-driven rulebook, and so this rulebook's been laid out in a way where you can ignore, for your first game, you can ignore everything in these boxes. You don't need to worry about it. It doesn't matter unless you're playing a advanced game. If you're just going to shuffle and play the cards of the deck and put your warbands together for your first game, don't even bother reading it. And it means that you can cut like whole sections of the rulebook out and not have to worry about it when you start off. That's a really cool new key feature for the rulebook itself, because it means if you're a new player, you can just jump in and know what the most important stuff is. They've done a good job, a bit like the Kill Team book again, in like how you set up a game. It goes stage-wise, right? So reveal your warbands, place your boards, and this is all true in the old rulebooks too, but because you can skip past these whole sections, you're just doing things through all these steps. Into the action phase, and there is a handy syllabus. You'll notice all this stuff on the back. So the turn sequence and the combat sequence and your steps. And then activations. So for those who've played this game before, it's pretty simple. You play 3 rounds trying to accumulate as much glory as you can. You can get glory by killing fighters. Fighters with more than 5 wounds count as 2 glory instead of 1 because they're harder to kill. And then you can complete your various objective cards. You have 12 of them in your deck typically as a minimum to earn more glory. End of 3 turns, per person with the most glory wins. You can do 4 actions typically, and then tons of reactions based on your power deck. Move, attack, guard, and charge. But on top of that, if you don't want to do an action, you can draw a power card, discard an objective card, and then draw one, or pass, just forfeit your activation. You get these little counters to flip to do your 4 activations per round. And yeah, everything's pretty much the same, like core mechanic wise, right? So a move action is move your hexes. You can do more than 1 per turn now, which is cool though. You can actually just like zip around. You're not stuck where you were, which actually speeds up slow warbands quite a bit. You just can't charge after you have a move token, but you can accumulate as many move tokens as you want, up to 4 for your actions. You can charge, and then of course if everyone charges, it means that those like super aggro warbands aren't stuck basically being locked all of a sudden. They can still make attack actions afterwards, or everyone has a charge token. And of course you can guard, which allows you to count both sides of the dice for a defense die as a defense, both the dodge and the block. And then that's really it. You can also just swing with an attack. And the attack sequence is pretty much the same as it's always been, right? You have attack die on your card, and you're gonna try and roll crits first, and then if you don't get any crits on either side, as many of the required successes as possible, with supports and double supports added if you have the models to do it. Additional rules, obviously we've got things like plunder. This was a new rule, I believe in NetherMaze, where you could dig for power cards during the power step if you're holding an objective and flip it. So if you're on that, you can basically dig around and try and draw more power cards. And then the rules for like being out of action, stuff like that. Universal rules like Grievous, Scything, and Knockback that can be on your weapons. Grievous is like a critical effect that triggers more damage. And of course the new one is Staggered. Basically you have a Stagger token, and there's various ways you can accumulate them. You can get Stagger tokens that don't seem like sort of thematically appropriate, but can also mean like you've exposed yourself by making like a berserk attack. A bunch of my characters in the Gnarlspirit pack can get Stagger tokens by acting out as like wild animals and doing certain power cards or maneuvers, which makes them easier to hit because they're basically like not caring about their own survival, but gives them like offensive bonuses and stuff like that too. Knockback, pushing people around. Guard and charge. Spells, which is of course just rolling your spell stat and trying to get the required successes, and then of course advanced casting and combat actions where you use the spell dice as combat dice. Power step's pretty much the same. Play power cards, delve, use your gamma cards, spend for upgrades. And you can see here again, if it's your first game, just don't worry about it. Don't worry about it, it's not here. The scatter template that was introduced in, oh geez, what was after Shadespire? Shadespire then, the one with the Briar Queen. Oh, I'm not remembering right now. Something Deep? Shadow Deep. Shadow Deep was the second one. And then timing for reactions and reaction chains have been cleared up a little bit. So like, you can only do 1 reaction per activation, but other people can create chains by reacting off your reactions. And those chains then will happen basically in a specific order. So like, Declare attack action, attack roll, defense roll, determine successes, deal damage, check if the target's out of action, driven back, end sequence, and then reaction steps when a fighter is dealt damage, when that would happen, reaction step after an action, charge action, move action, attack action. There's 2 different trigger steps, after an activation step. So you get a full like chart of when all the trigger steps for reactions happen. This is it's a good visual representation, but I will say this is the most gamey feeling of it. It's been cleared up. It's super cut and dry now, like when you react and how you react, and most of the newer cards will fall into these reaction windows. But if I was a new player, this is still the most like, what? When do I do these things? It says in your card. Also, what it says in your card, these are the actual like timings for those things. And then your end phase, for doing your end phase actions, scoring your your glory, and then discarding and pulling your new hands. And then 2 and 3, and then you win with the most of your glory. Multiplayer games, so you see there are rules for if you have multiple boards playing multiplayer games and how to roll off and do those things. Feature tokens, how to like basically parse it with more than those players. And then a big glossary. It's funny because this has grown a lot over time, and they've done a good job of condensing all of the bold like glossary terms into one space. So there we go, the core rulebook for Gnarlwood. Great job on this. This is cutting out a lot of chaff and reducing much mental load, which I think is important. And more importantly, all previous editions of Underworlds have basically only ever given you 2 warband decks, right? You've had your warband deck for your 2 warbands that come in the box. That's all you have to play with. Including 2 more decks that are just complete ready-to-go decks out of the box, and allowing me to go back all the way to the beginning and be like, I'm going to play Steel Hearts Champions with the Daring Delvers as like a universal deck. I don't need anything else except my character cards and this deck. I'm ready to rock and roll, right? This is the Rivals format, I think, at its best, because this box set, if you own Warbands already and you've played nothing of the new editions of Warhammer Underworlds, if you're totally off, if the last game you played was Shadow something, Nether Maze, like Beast Grave, like you go all the way back to Beast Grave if you want to. You can just grab your warband cards, right? Your models, your actual figures, so just the character cards themselves, and one of these 2 decks, and jump in and play with your friends, jump in and play with whoever is this box. So you effectively have, for each of these things, you have 3 pre-constructed decks to play with. Right in the box. You can do the Gnarlspirits with these 2 pre-constructed universal decks. You can do the Sons of Velmorn with these. And then if you have any of these, right, you just need the character cards. These are actually the old premium. I think these were the launch cards for... I didn't want to pull my original cards. I wanted to use the special cards, so I used the special... I have my Garrick Reavers ones. Well, if you want to play with your first edition original like Shadespire box and use those warbands, you won't feel out of date, right? Because you're just using the core character cards and you're using a completely up-to-date new edition Rivals deck, right, for the Universal Rivals decks. Now the last thing that's kind of cool is both these Rivals decks have plots. And that means that there's a theme to the deck and what you're doing. So like the Daring Delvers one, if you include 1 or more cards of the Daring Delvers thing, you can reveal this plot to your warband. There's things in here that increase your exploration count. Your exploration count starts at 0, and over the course of like doing things with features, when you place a feature token during a round, you can gain an exploration. At the end of an action phase for each friendly fighter that's on a feature token, you gain 1. At the end of the action phase for each surviving friendly explorer that's not in your territory, you're going to get 1. So you can increase your exploration, and you can see this little tracker here, up to 10 to do it. At the end of each round, for each enemy fighters on a feature token that's in your territory, you'll lose 1. And then your feature tokens actually trigger a lot of the stuff that's in here off of your objectives and gamuts and stuff like that. So like, for instance, Claim Guardians, scores an end phase of 2 or more surviving friendly fighters are each holding an objective, and your exploration counts 5 or more, right? So you can, and what's awesome is the art on these includes all the old warbands. So look, there's Garrick's Reavers. Look at this. Look at all these old warbands that are in here featured in the card art. Because the intention with these is to give new life to your old warbands, and also additional ways to play with the other warbands that come in this box or previous editions. So if there's one thing about this box set I think that is, like, besides like the obvious, like, let's go back and look at our other boxes and see what made them, you know what I mean, like either confusing or a lot of rules or like hard to like jog through. That reduced mental load of the way it's like laid out is a big deal. But the other thing is giving it replayability, having 2 universal decks in here that let you play the game with old warbands or with these same warbands in a completely new way without having to like dig through tons of previous edition cards and stuff like that that feels like a really fresh take on how do you refresh the game, how do you kind of like compartmentalize the game, and how do you make it accessible to older players who've been around for a while, or players who maybe just painted a warband. Like Mike's just painted warbands in the past and hasn't really gotten in the game. He can just bring his figures and his character cards and grab one of these decks and play a modern, like, Gnarlwood experience, like a new Warhammer Underworlds experience with zero, like, have to, like, you know, sort of like prep or research. You can just dive in and play. I think that's really valuable for a new box set. And if they're looking to sort of relaunch this game post-pandemic, it's a really clever, smart way of doing it. So that's my favorite thing about this box so far. And I would say that as far as launch products Games Workshop's done in the last little while, this feels like one of the most thought out ones. And as far as like value to experience goes, they basically cranked up the value for your experience by giving you more replayability and more ability to like approach the game with a lower gate. You know what I mean? If you're not super familiar with Underworlds, you're not a competitive player, or you're just like building and painting miniatures, this is like a la carte. Now, if you are a competitive player or you like a more like deck building experience, these are also the basis for the NEMESIS format. And the NEMESIS format is when you start mixing one of these decks, so not both decks, but one of these decks of universal cards, like these universal rivals decks, with another rivals deck. And then you have a pool of universal cards and cards from your warband, and you can use any warband's warband cards plus their character cards to create a constructed deck and do a constructed format. But it's just that. At most, it's going to be that many cards. So think about the reduced mental strain versus Relic, which is their like unlimited format where you can use anything that's ever been made. This right here, that's the kind of like sort of mid-range constructed format and you can still change it because you can swap it out for this deck instead and have these cards. But that makes it so that people who want to dabble in deck construction, it's not overwhelming and it's not too much. And also they can continuously refresh that without having to worry about the knock-on impact, because these are self-contained universal card sets of a bajillion other cards going forward, right? So it's not just constantly stacking complexity on top of it the way that Relic will, where you just have like, you have to have a ban list and a curated like, these cards are in, these cards are out, and you've got all these cards, like thousands of cards now that you have to like kind of like keep track of. This right here feels like the, I don't know, but the curated sort of Underworlds experience where everyone gets some choice and some like customization options, but it's not going to be so crazy to keep track of the way that some card game formats and some like Relic and expanded formats are going to be. So that's my favorite thing about the box. These two new little separate decks that give you it's such a toolkit from a game design point of view, because you can both redesign the decks that are in here, you can play NEMESIS format with it, or you can come along with, you know, when did this game come out? 2018, 2017 was when Shadespire came out. And you can just dive right in with your original warbands. And that's what I'm going to do. I want to try and play these warbands out of the box with Garrick's Reavers and Steelheart's Champions and see how it goes. See what the gameplay is like, so you guys can check it out and see if it runs true. So I'm going to grab some people who haven't played Underworlds in a while, maybe played it a long time with me, like Nick or Mike or other Mike or Jay. And we'll play through some of these core format games going forward, so you can check it out. And you can also check out the Learn to Play Gnarlwood game that I did today with Mike online. I'll link it up here in the cards. So anyway, big thanks for watching. That's my GMG review of Warhammer Underworlds and Gnarlwood. Thanks to Mash. Have a good night. Hey there, I hope you enjoyed that video. There are tons of other games already recorded for you to watch. Click over to my channel page if you haven't already, and have a look to the dozens of playlists full of videos. I guarantee you'll discover a game you haven't seen played before. I put out new videos 7 days a week, and every day is themed to a different genre as I continue to explore the wider world of gaming. Of course, none of that's possible without you, the viewer, so click a like and subscribe if you'd like to stay on top of what's happening here daily. My two kids and I are massively grateful to be able to have the flexibility of this job so I can always maximize my time with them. If you want to support me continuing to put out this content, it's only possible because of my amazing backers on Patreon who support the studio, equipment, and model cost, as well as being how I make the bulk of my living. You can also help out by buying a t-shirt through Spreadshirt, a measuring gauge or widget from Deathray Designs, or buying one of my games and supplements like Last Days, Gamma Wolves, and Blaster. As a way of showing my appreciation, patrons get early access to new games and supplements that I write throughout the course of the year. Huge thanks for watching, it really does help out, and happy gaming.